Here on Textile Indie, we're currently working on a tapestry weaving project. You can find all of the previous videos and resources in the description below. Thanks for joining me once again for this tapestry weaving series. Today we're going to work on angled weaving, as you probably guessed from the thumbnail, and we're going to be incorporating two different colors, working on this section of our tapestry. If you're following along with me using the PDF printable from my website, textileindie.com, you can find the link to this cartoon in the description below. Print that off, and we're using this as the base design for our tapestry. For my tapestry, I'm using naturally dyed wool yarns, and today I'll be using this madder root dyed wool and this acorn dyed wool. And if you want more on natural dyeing, you can find my playlist in the description below with all of my natural dye videos there. Let's dive into the technique of weaving angles in your tapestry. If you don't have a tapestry loom set up and warped and your initial section of the header and the stripes woven, all of those videos and resources are linked below, so check those out to be able to get started with this video. I'm going to tuck in my cartoon behind my weaving, and this is the placement for this section of our weaving. Now, this is a kind of generic design because my warp threads are wider than this design was calculated for. So I'm going to use this as my outline and weave an angle that's evenly placed on my warp using this suggestion. To do that, we're going to weave 4 rows across in plain weave and then build up at a stair-step angle up the body of our warp until we have created this triangle here. So this lower triangle. And I will be weaving this in my madder root dyed wool. Now, to make this process easier with your loom, because it's going to want to bounce around and lift up on you, you can either set it on a blanket or a towel or a piece of fabric on your work surface so it's not as loud banging on the table, or you can set it on the edge of a table like so and use C-clamps to clamp it to your table. So if I were to do this, which I'm going to do, I'm going to stick these right on the elbows of the loom, these pieces here, and tighten this down. This way I can lift the shed stick a little bit higher and have more space to send my warp or weft thread through without my loom lifting up on me, because now it's sturdy to the table. Now I can start weaving, lift up my shed stick, and I can send this through without trying to hold the loom down and my shed stick and pull my yarn through all at the same time. So you're going to count your rows, and when you have the first row, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to go back and do one more pass, so you end up with a total of 6 on this initial row. So I'll go back, and you want to end on the side that you started on. And by end, I just mean we're going to do the next stair step in this process. So we have 6 rows here, but 5 of them are going to be the first section of our triangle. Now we're going to go back in towards the left, and instead of catching this far right warp thread, we're going to skip it. So we're building up towards the left. Each of our 3 to 5 rows, we're going to skip one warp thread towards the left. So skipping this outer warp thread, we're going to lift up and go under the warp threads just beyond it. And I need to take my rings off because I'm getting caught. Now, as we go back, we're going to weave towards the right, but instead of going all the way across, we're going to stop at that second warp thread. So right here, This second warp thread is where we're going to end this row. So the second one in. Okay, so again, skipping that first warp thread, we're going to the second one and across. So you can see our stair step starting to happen here as we lift up. So now we'll do one more pass, left to right. We have one more row, so I'll go back towards the left. And then back towards the right. And now we're going to skip under, so we're skipping 2 threads and going up over this third one. So this warp thread we're skipping, the second warp thread we're skipping, and we're going under the third warp thread. So go back towards the right, going under the third warp thread and across. So we're stair stepping up one more thread to the left, building that angle over one thread. So we have a loop over that third thread to the left. Now you're going to weave each stair step so you end up with 3 loops on each warp thread moving towards the left and building up an angle as you weave. Continue to weave, creating 6 rows per step up the warp of the thread and ending up with 3 loops around each of these warp ends as we build up the side of the tapestry. As you're working, make sure to angle up your weft thread as you're weaving so that you can pack it down and allow a little bit of ease to work into the fabric so that you're not fighting the sides of your tapestry to stay straight. That will give enough ease in the weaving to keep both sides straight up and down and not starting to draw inward. What happens if you pull too tight here on the edge is that your walls start to curve or angle in and you don't end up with a nice straight tapestry. So angle your weft thread up like this and pack from the far edge. If you have too much of a bubble, you can pull on it a little bit, angle that in, and then pack it down from there so that you end up with enough weft thread in your structure. Once you've finished your first side of the angled weave, we're going to move on to the second side. The first side of your angled weave, you'll build up so that you have the 3 turns on each warp thread. And at one point about here, I switched to 2 wraps per warp thread so that my angle was going up more dramatically, so it's not quite as tall. And you can make those adjustments as you're weaving, as you see how big of a space your shapes are forming as you're weaving. Up here at the top, I continued to do the 2 loops per warp thread up until I have 3 warps that I'm working over. And I'm going to end the point of my angle at overlapping those 3 warp threads rather than trying to wrap around just the one to create a complete point, because that adds some density to the fabric, some security in my left thread, and it helps to build the structure of the weave for the next shape. So now I'm ready to start the other section of my angle weave, and that's going to be in this acorn dyed wool yarn. So just like we did on this side but switched, we're going to weave from this corner up and meet here at our stair step. So this first segment, I'm actually going to grab a tapestry needle and a shorter piece of yarn, because I want to be able to pick up these threads here and grab those threads with my needle and pull my yarn through. I'll cut about 3 feet of yarn to work with and thread my needle. And now with the needle end, I'm going to come in, and each of these 3 loops, if you lift this up so you can see the 3 loops here, I'm going to go under this outer warp thread, catch one of those loops with my tapestry needle like so, and pull through so that I end up with a 5-inch tail here, and then go over my warp thread, so opposite that previous row, and then under and catch the next loop up. I'm just catching the yarn loop, not the warp. Pull through. You may have to shorten your thread, and I'm trying to do this so that I'm not pulling the warp in, I'm keeping it straight up and down. So now this one goes under and then over and catch the last loop here, and then under, and I'll pack that down. Now I'll do the same thing for these next 2 stair steps, so this on the 3rd warp and this one on the 4th warp, so that I'm building a nice structure for the beginning of my angle, and then I can go back to meeting up and doing a stair step without attaching the loops. And I'll go over that in a minute. And I'm making sure to continue that opposite weave pattern for each consecutive row. So if it was over before, it's under now, kind of a thing, all the way up. And once you have built up that section, so the start of your angle down here where they're attached, then you can switch to your butterfly and start weaving with your butterfly. So again, just like we did before, I could go and pick up my threads and weave across. At the start of this angle, it might be worth finger picking your threads to get the correct warp and weave pattern. To get started, you can eventually begin using your shed sticks once again as you get further up the weave. For now, pulling on your warp threads with your shed sticks is going to be tricky because they're going to stop at the top of this angle, and you need to lift them up all the way down here. So you can figure it out and make it happen. Just make sure you pick up the correct threads. So now each pass, you're going to stair step up 3 lengths once again, or 3 times per warp across. So for this set of warps, I'm stair stepping up 3 times, and then I'll shift over 1 warp thread and stair step, adding another warp thread for another 3 passes. And you might find that when you did the tapestry needle weaving just now, your shed sticks change direction. So where this shed stick I was lifting to go from right to left, now it is taking me left to right in the orientation of which way I weave. So you'll continue weaving in this way, building up. So I grab this new warp thread to the left here. I'm weaving around. You will end up with some gaps between each section, and if you leave a nice amount of ease in your weaving, those will sort of meld together. The more you pull, the more dramatic that separation will become, and they'll separate and cause holes. At the end of your tapestry, you can go in with some sewing thread and stitch those up so they're not as visible, but you can also weave in such a way that it keeps them closed naturally by allowing enough ease in the weft threads to fill that space. And here at the beginning, I'm just using my fingers to do my packing rather than my comb because it's such a small space. As you go up higher, you can grab your comb once again or your beater and start beating your rows down and pack them close together again. Now I'm shifting over up 1 stair step, so I'm going to grab this warp thread right here and across to go up and over 1 more time. You'll continue in this stair step pattern again, back up to the top of the previous triangle piece. And once we get to that point, we'll discuss how to finish this off in the next segment of the tapestry. Well, I've completed the second part of my angled weave. You can see here this acorn dyed section I met up with the madder dyed section, and I have a nice straight angle here. It's got a little bit of a curve because I switched from 3 passes to 2 passes up here at the top, but I've completed this section. Obviously my section on my tapestry for this angled part is a lot larger because I chose to pick a number of warp turns, so 3 turns on a single warp, and then went to 2 turns. If you want to do this shape, you can follow along having this under your tapestry and follow along changing warps as you see fit to create it however, whatever size you want. I've come up to this top section where I finished on these 3 warps here with the madder root and finished up with the acorn. Now I've completed the angle. I'm ready to complete some more stripes. So there are 4 stripes here on my tapestry design, mimicking this lower portion here, but smaller. So maybe 2 or 3 rows of 4 different colors, or you could alternate, or you could just do 1 large block of color if you wanted to. And then we would move on to this curved section. Now we're going to save the curves for the next video in the series, so be sure to check back for that. Finish up the straight stripes here, 4 stripes right above this. It's a small section, so go ahead and put those in before the next video comes out. Don't forget to check the description below for all the tools and materials. I have all my favorite tools and materials for tapestry weaving on my website, textileindy.com, and those are listed in the description below. You can also find a blog post with all of that information and all of my blog posts and YouTube videos collected in one place on my website, textileindy.com. Link in the description below. If you are working on your own tapestry, be sure to share a picture on Instagram or Facebook and tag me at textileindy, or share it in the community tab on my YouTube channel. I'd love to have you share things there and build a community of makers and creatives. Hope to see you in my next video. Until then, happy weaving. Bye.